Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Caleb Moore, wide receiver, analyst, assistant coach, University of Arizona football. Coach, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Let's get into it. So take
Yes,
us through
sir.
background. Obviously, you're there. You've been at a few stops, but start at the beginning, right?
Yes,
High
sir.
school, college. How'd you get into coaching? What led to your first job and any moves along the way?
Oh, yeah. I grew up a coach's kid. My dad, he coached college and high school football, moved 11 times by the age of 11, but he got a job with the United Football League way back when with the New York Centennials. And their training camp was actually in Arizona. And that's why me and my family moved to Arizona. Got a little brother, mom and dad. We moved out here. And so after that league fell apart, he ended up coaching at Chandler High School. And so I went there my first 2 years. And then he got a job at Brophy College Prep out in Phoenix. And so obviously made the move with him. And so getting to be around him a bunch, especially like in those really formative high school years, that's when the idea of coaching popped into my mind. And so from there, I went on to play Division III football at a school called Lake Forest College, about 45 minutes north of Chicago. I played quarterback, and so I played quarterback and tore my rotator cuff and labrum. That wasn't too good of a thing for me in my playing career. So from that, started actually working with the quarterbacks while I was injured, and that was my junior year. And so lucky for me, that timed out with COVID, and COVID hit about 5 months after my surgery, so right in the middle of rehab. So from that, I was working with the quarterbacks, kind of helping them out. And I'd always had this interest in coaching, and football had always been my goal in life, whether that's working in the NFL or big time college football. So from there, got into coaching, got my first job at Wisconsin-Whitewater about a year later, year after that, after my surgery. So Division III, actually about 2 hours away from Lake Forest, so not too far. So I got hired as the offensive line analyst when a guy by the name of Quinn Miners was coming out in the draft. So got to cross paths with him, work with him a little bit, learn some from that. And offensive line coach name was Brent Allen. He's a offense coordinator, Wisconsin Platteville now. So it was awesome to get to learn from him as I got into coaching. And so from there, I actually got my first Bill Walsh internship with the Green Bay Packers. And so that was before I had ever coached a season of football before. Literally went down to Green Bay probably about 2 weeks after I walked across the stage for graduation during COVID, which was its own deal in itself. And so then I came back from Green Bay and ended up getting promoted to the running backs coach over there. First year coaching Wisconsin-Whitewater, we went 14-1, had a coached 3 players in my position group that were older than me. So that was a very base setting experience for me when it came to coaching. From there, I got hired at Arizona State as the receiver GA. A couple of mutual connections, but it came down to Kyle Jacobo, having a relationship with a couple of people I knew. Coach Iguano was my high school head coach. My dad was his defensive coordinator at Chandler High School. And so he was the running back coach and ended up being the interim head coach at ASU. So it was a really cool experience for me. And then someone who's my big brother to this day, and I work here with at the University of Arizona, Bobby Wade. He was the receiver coach, as well as my good friend Wesley Johnson. He was also there at the time, and that's where we crossed paths. But so I went to ASU in 2022, which, as we all know, was a year filled with learning experiences. Coach Edwards, who I have a lot of respect for and a lot of gratitude for, being as he gave me my first Division I football job. He got fired week 4. 4 weeks into my first D1 experience, came back home to Arizona. And I'm like, oh shit, this is real. So from there, went throughout that year. Coach Iguano was the interim head coach. He gave me a lot of really good experiences and opportunities. And after the year, I ended up going to Georgia Southern as their receiver GA. And so that was wanting to really commit to trying to be a coach and not wanting to move into the recruiting side of things at Arizona State. Made my way to the deep South, rural South Georgia. Lived in Statesboro, Georgia, worked for Coach Helton, Coach Ellis, who made a big impact on my coaching career. Coach BJ Johnson, he was a receiver coach, and I got to work really hand in hand with him. And Georgia Southern it was new for me, but I have a lot of appreciation for that. I would say I grew up a lot in that time. Anyone that knows anything about football in the deep South is that's it for them. They really value it. They have a lot of respect for the game. And so I learned how to do things the right way. One of their sayings is do right. And then they also talked about how if you're not living right off the field, then how could your football be, whether that's on the field or in your coaching life or anything like that. So that was a great year of learning for me. And then after that year, we played in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. I remember going to the coaches convention, hanging out with all my buddies that were still at ASU or elsewhere. And so I'm driving back from the convention with the offensive line GA, who was my roommate at the time, Keenan Murphy, lifelong friend I made out in Georgia. But so we drive back. As we pull into our house from Charlotte at the coaches convention, that's when Nick Saban decided to retire, right? And so that long domino effect, I ended up, Coach Brennan got hired here at Arizona. Coach Brennan was actually the receiver GA when, like I said, my big brother, Coach Bobby Wade, was playing at Arizona. So he coached him. And so he got hired as the head coach. And I sent it to Bobby. I was like, oh, that'd be crazy if you ended up working there. And so one thing led to another, and Bobby got hired as the receiver coach. And never forget it. He called me. He's like, hey, I'm going down for my interview. Make sure you stay ready. Ended up getting the job. And obviously I'm here today. So ended up back in my home state of Arizona, working down in Tucson with Coach Wade, Coach Brennan. Last year, worked for Dino Babers, who my dad coached with in Syracuse, or at UCLA, excuse me, formerly the Syracuse head coach. I would say a lifelong family friend, and I'm appreciative to be here.
That's a lot. I want to go back to the very.
It's been a long 5 years.
No doubt. I want to go all the way back to your 11. 11 moves by the time you're 11. Talk a little bit about how that informed your maturation as an adult eventually, obviously, but even now in the, let's call it, transient world of collegiate coaching, especially at, we'll say, our younger years.
Yeah.
How did that experience prepare you for this experience, and what lessons have you taken from that life of being uprooted every year, it would seem?
Yes, sir. The obvious one is like you learn to adapt in new situations. You learn to adapt to new people. In my opinion, the most important thing, in especially coaching, but in life, is the people, right? It's the people you're able to surround yourself with. It's the relationships you're able to build. And so I just learned how to make connections with new people. I think that carries even into when I was in high school, going to Chandler High School, which I know what it is now, but back when I went there, like, they had never won a state championship. They had never beat Hamilton High School. That was a very, if you want to say, a little bit of a rough area, and the school hadn't really gotten to the point it's at now. And then spent 2 years there, and then I would go to Brophy College Prep, which is an all-boy Catholic school. Probably had about 30 Black kids in the entire school. And you just learn how to adapt to different environments and make connections with different people, whether that's through football or anything else. And obviously for me, football has been a big connector in how I relate to people, shared experience, whether that's playing or coaching. I would say that was probably the thing that moving so much in my early years has helped me the most with.
Do you feel that, and obviously we're reaching into the time machine here, but
oh yeah, let's do it.
Do you feel that has prepared you for the networking aspect of this career, in that you got to be comfortable talking to people and making new friends, right? When you're leaving and moving every year. So obviously you learn that through the process, but what takeaways do you have that you could share with others of, listen, when you're in a new situation, here are the life hacks, 1, 2, 3.
No doubt. So the obvious one for me that pops into my mind is when it comes to recruiting. Like, even, for example, last year, we signed a receiver from Florida and we signed a receiver from Arizona. Two very different places, two very different lifestyles, and it's just being able to relate to both of them. Living in Georgia, living in Arizona, even living out in Chicago, in Wisconsin, it's like you got to find those shared experiences that you connect with people on, whether as small or as big as that may be. And then from there, it's just about getting to know people. And I feel like if you're a good person and you have good intentions, as long as you're willing to listen and talk with other people, there's something that you guys have shared, something that you guys have a shared experience with. And then I'm sure in my case, there's been a lot of things where I've experienced something that someone else is interested in, and vice versa, where they've done something or been through something that I'm interested in, and then you just sit there and chop it up about that and go from there. But like I said, like, as long as you're a good person, you have good intentions, usually that goes over well with people, and they're more than willing to form a relationship and form a friendship.
Yeah, but how do you get to that point, right? What's the break the ice moment of the secret art of small talk or whatever, that we're in this big group at this football convention and you're going to sit down and it's, shit, should I talk to this person?
Yeah. In my opinion, I think as long as you're willing to have the confidence and go up to somebody and introduce yourself, the way you carry yourself, I think has a big part to play in that. But it's just really having the confidence to make that first introduction. Go up to someone, hey, I like your shoes. My name is Caleb I work at the University of Arizona. What do you do? And ask them a question about themselves. Because one thing for sure is everyone loves to talk about themselves. And so as long as you give them that platform and then you provide the presence that you're willing to listen and, you're not going to make any judgments about them and you're genuinely curious about them, I think from there, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And I think just going to the AD conference or you're going to this football conference or
Yes,
other
sir.
coaches going other places and you've got to figure out a way to get into the cliques that have already been established, right? It's like,
Yes,
how
sir.
are you doing that? I love that for you. Okay.
And I could even give you an example of
Yeah,
that.
please.
So I actually was just up in Green Bay for the past couple of weeks. I did their Bill Walsh internship. And in the NFL, they get 3-day weekends. And so you're up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's not necessarily a
I
lot
have.
to
I
do.
was there a summer, 2 summers ago.
Okay. Yeah. There's not anything to do out there.
No, it's just the Packers
There's
Stadium. There's like the Walmart, a couple other things.
They got a couple nice places to eat. Very nice town, quiet. And so me and one of the other interns, we actually end up saying, hey, bro, I grew up, I went to college in Chicago. I want to go back out there. Are you interested? And he ends up taking me up on that. And so we're driving to the train station in Milwaukee. So we drive to Milwaukee, take the train to Chicago and come back at night. But I ended up finding out he not only went to high school, but graduated with my cousin. And this is some random dude I'm doing a Green Bay Packers internship with. I've never met before. And so it's just really being willing to strike up that conversation and about yourself, about your family, whatever it may be. And shoot, it leads you to that point out of a random conversation, a random trip with a random person. So I thought that was pretty cool. But going back to your point, you never know what it's going to lead to.
Never, not at all. And building your network is probably one of the most important things you can do in this world, not just coaching. Dad was a coach. So
Yes, sir.
what, in hindsight now, so you're whatever, 5 years into your coaching career, essentially.
Yes, sir.
What are the things that, as a youth, with a father as a coach, where I'm trying to think about how to frame this appropriately. I've got children that are multi-sport athletes, right? Where kind of nod and blow you off. And then my daughter's graduating from college this year, and there's a funny thing in the family chat about Dad was right. What are some of the things that you now realize when you were, nah, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about, but now you're in this seat, you're like, shit, he had this thing figured out.
No doubt. I think the first thing is like, football can lead to so many things in your life. And as long as you're willing to explore those avenues, whether it's like, for me, it's been a job, I've been able to travel, I've been able to meet people that I've either looked up to growing up while I was growing up or live in places I've always wanted to be. Taking advantage of football and using it as a vehicle for your life. I got a good chunk. I played Division III football, so we didn't have full ride scholarships, but I got a good chunk of my college paid for through football. It's led me to different jobs. It's led me to live all over the country. So it's just using football as your vehicle or whatever your passion is to reach where you want to go. And so that I'd say that's the biggest thing I got from my dad while he was coaching. And number two would be the competitiveness.
Yeah.
This is whatever you're doing, whether you're in the classroom growing up, trying to win the times table multiplication sheet, be the first one done, or you're on the field coaching against another team for a championship, or even if it's a meaningless game at the end of the regular season, you're not going for the playoffs. It's just taking pride in your performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any things that you find yourself saying that you didn't think you ever would that your dad used to coach and used to say?
A lot of people think I grew my beard or my goatee I used to have because of him. But it's actually interesting. My dad is a lifelong defensive coach. He coaches defensive line. He's been a defensive coordinator. And I played quarterback. So that's been the joke growing up in football is like, how does your dad coach D-line trying to train people to sack the quarterback and you end up playing quarterback and being an offensive coach? But that's always been something people have talked to me about as I've gone through it.
I'd love to know more about that, not with your dad and you, but Wesley, obviously wide receiver, did offensive stuff for me here at the high school. Now he's a linebacker coach, right? Did some DBs. You went from being a quarterback to an O-line analyst to the running back coach. Talk about the learning curve, number one, but also how it's so interwoven that it's not hard to really switch positions when you get the right mindset around it.
I think football, when you break it down, Coach Daggy, our offense coordinator now, says everything's about spacing, timing, and rhythm, right? And so, like, the first piece of that spacing, like, you take defensive line play, you take basketball, you take receiver play, It's all about getting on an edge of someone and working half a man and having the angle to go score or go win, right? And so I think there's a lot of fundamentals when any sport you pick up, like it's the same thing. And so obviously there's different ways to get to that. Like in basketball, you got to dribble a ball and then you do it. And football, you have to break a tackle. But I think there's a lot of things, just whether it's by position or by sport, that are very similar when it comes to that. But the learning curve has been interesting, especially as you break down like playing Division III, starting as a Division III offensive line coach, and then even making the jump to Division I. And since I've been in the NFL for these internships, at the end of the day, and something I always pride myself on, it just comes down to your work ethic, in my opinion. I think if you're willing to put in the time and really be serious about it, you can learn anything. And now it's just on you in those in-between times. Are you willing to sit down and watch a clinic over a weekend to learn something more about football to where you can bring that to your players? Or are you willing to listen to other people's opinions that you may have never met before and let them help you develop as a coach or develop your techniques or whatever it may be? But I think it's just the willingness to learn and then just the willingness to put in the work. That's the biggest thing when it comes to those learning curves. And that's what I did, honestly.
So Division III, Division I, NFL. What's the difference?
Recruiting.
But I mean,
Big
I
time.
guess, is it just that you're dealing with the next layer of freakish athleticism the higher you go up the chain? Like, how would you, and I'm more asking about with the transfer portal coming in and professionalizing college sports. With NIL, you're basically the minor leagues now, right? And you have all these kids that still want to play that are high school kids whose opportunities have narrowed. What's the reality? Who can play Division III football? Who can play Division II football? Who can play Who can play in the NFL? What's the separator? Because it's not just hard work. There are dudes that are in it. They just are.
We sometimes will say, since I've been at ASU, there's been a saying, it's called "you lost at birth." And so there's a lot of people that are born and just can't play at that level, especially when it comes to the NFL. I think Division I is a little different. I think there's ways you can make it on this level without necessarily having the talent. But honestly, the biggest difference in my mind is just I guess, objectives or priorities of someone at each level. Because you got to think Division III football, there's 1 in 1,000, if that make it to the NFL or even get an opportunity at the NFL. So like you're recruiting these guys with the same intensity, but now you're selling them like in Whitewater is, oh, we're between a bunch of metropolitan cities where you could get a job and make these connections and be fine when you're done playing football, because football wasn't necessarily the main objective when you're a Division III player or coach. And then you get to ASU and then it's like, all right, all these dudes are going to Division I. Same with U of A, where it's like you're a Power 4 football player or Power 5 football player at the time. Like you have a real opportunity to play in the NFL. So now let's overly focus on that with the fallback plan and the extra time you spend on like setting up your next life. And then you get to the NFL and that is their job, period. That is their main focus. There's no class in the day that you have to focus on. Like you live in the city where you play football, and that is what gets the bills paid, puts food on the table. For me, it's been adjusting to different mindsets when it comes to where they're at in their career. That's been the most interesting part.
So if I'm counting correctly, you've got, you played at Lake Forest, you started your coaching there, you went to Wisconsin-Whitewater, at ASU, you went to Georgia Southern, and now at Arizona. So 5 stops?
5 stops. Yes, sir.
So what would you say is the best thing that you have taken away from each one of those that's going into your file box for when you're in charge? That these are either culture setters, they're either, I don't want to call it drill work, but activity that transfers into building culture. Things that if you were Lord and Master of all, we're doing this because of the impact that it has.
So like for Lake Forest being that's where I played, my playing career ended and kind of first got into coaching. It's my appreciation for the game of football that you get perspective on when you're done playing. And I think everyone that's ever played any sport and has had a love for it, that obviously like you get into coaching that you have for the game. So I knew from that point on, it's like I was a redshirt sophomore when I suited up last. And so it's like you never know. Like people say, you never know when it's your last play. Like I lived that. I would say that's what I got at Lake Forest. Whitewater, I think those are some of the best coaches I've ever been around, some of the toughest players I've ever been around. And so it's just the standard, if you will, of what's expected when you're coming in to work out, when you're coming in to prepare for practice, anything like that. And that was a kind of opened my eyes to what it meant to truly be a coach and to own the room and not only mentor the kids on the field, but help them off the field and care about them and make sure they have a job when they graduate and all that kind of stuff. I think that was a big lesson I learned at Whitewater. And then at ASU, it's just like the networking piece of everything. And so if you really want to make that jump, if you really want to be a position coach in college, be a coordinator in college, or even get to the NFL, it's about the people you know. And when you do get the chance to spend time with them, the product that you put out there. I walk into ASU and I'm working with Marvin Lewis, who is this icon that I've always looked up to growing up. It's just like larger than life. And now his office is across the way from where I sit every day. And I'm working with him every day on the scout team, trying to get the looks right, because offensive GAs at ASU worked with the scout team offense, right? Just making sure you go about your work the right way. And they always preach to be a pro. And the way they moved and the way they worked embodied that. And so it's trying to replicate that is my biggest lesson at ASU. And then at Georgia Southern, like when I tell you Coach Ellis and Coach Applin, Coach Helton, all those dudes on that staff, Coach Woods, Coach Reed, BJ. So they just embody what it is to truly be a coach, right? So I'll never forget Coach Ellis. We're getting ready to go into the season. It's like July-ish time. And he has each of the support staff members. We go to each player's apartment to make sure they have everything they need, like bed frame, food in the fridge, soap, the basic essentials. But you never think about it as like, this kid's away from home for the first time. Does he know what he needs to put in his cabinet? Does he know what he needs to live day to day? And you go through that experience and you learn these kids actually don't know how to be an adult and maintain themselves in the real world when they get out there for the first time. And it's your job to do it. I mean, he always used to say that's why they call us coach. And so just the amount he cared for the players and all the lessons on the field, but it's those lessons off the field that kind of stick in my mind and made such a big impact on me, how Coach Helton cared about his staff, how he went about taking care of them. Like I remember his wife was always around, his kids were always around, and seeing that like that life is possible while still coaching. Like you could be present with your family and all that and still be a great coach and a great person and care about your players. So I thought that was really cool when I was out in Georgia Southern. And then ever since I got to Arizona, my goal in my life has always been to coach in the NFL. And my goal initially was to play in the NFL. Very early on, I realized that wasn't going to be the reality for me. So then I
lost at birth.
No doubt. I did. That's for sure. My body doesn't want to stay healthy, and I cannot throw the ball like some of these quarterbacks I've been around. But so transitioned my goal to wanting to coach in the NFL, right? And so I walk into the situation in Arizona, and we're coaching the best receiver in the country with T-Mac. And so you learn, and like I got glimpses of this when I was doing my internship with the Packers, and being able to go back these last couple of weeks and do that again was cool. But like you get glimpses of how to treat players at that level. But then to coach one of them for a year, it's a little different of an experience. And especially being someone like me, like I didn't play in the NFL. I don't have this name to stand on. Oh, I did this, so you should listen to me. It's every day through your work and through how you treat other people, respect, and gain the ability to even coach them. So learning how to do that, I think that gave me a great learning experience for if I am able to make it to the NFL. But then also just recognizing how special of a thing that is working with a really good player. Noah Fafita, our quarterback, he's another one that he's a really special player. So just getting to be around that kind of talent and those high quality people, just learning how to navigate that and manage that on a day-to-day basis, I think has been my biggest lesson in terms of my goals of trying to coach in the NFL.
So when you say you got to coach the best receiver in the country, what separates that guy from the average receiver besides winning at birth? What are the real separators that you were able to take from your experience working with him and the quarterback to now hold the standard for these other guys and be like, hey, man, listen, I've seen this movie.
Yeah. So T-Mac is a volleyball player. It's not, I guess a lot of people don't know that. He's really a volleyball player, and I guarantee you go and ask him, you get paid the same amount of money to play both sports, what you going to play? He'll say volleyball. And so seeing how volleyball translates to being an elite receiver when it comes to timing up a jump, going to high point a ball, I think it translates to his ball skills as well. And seeing how playing multiple sports growing up can really help someone as they try to take their game to the next level. And like I was talking about earlier, seeing how things in other sports translates to football. So I think that's the biggest lesson I learned when it came to him, but also just seeing about how they go about their work, right? T-Mac was in, we like to get a workout in the mornings as coaches, try to stay in shape, try to keep up with the guys. And no one would talk about it, but T-Mac was in there at 6 o'clock in the morning, stretching, getting his body, getting prepared for the day. So it doesn't have to be someone that necessarily talks about it a lot, but goes about their work like a pro. And I think I got glimpses of those lessons when I was at ASU, but T-Mac embodied that every day. So it's like the natural talent on top of how he goes about his work is the biggest thing. And just having the mindset of I'm that guy and I'm willing to prove it every single snap.
When you think about how the landscape of college athletics has formationally shifted in the last 3 years,
Yep.
what allows you to remain optimistic, and what are some of the things that you are sad to see go?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is like them cutting down the roster size and getting rid of walk-ons in Division I football. I think that's ridiculous. It's like these guys that are literally sacrificing to be on the team and to play football, similar to how you do in Division III. It's like you're not getting anything to be there. You're just doing it out of the love for the game. I think that's a travesty. But something that I gained appreciation for that you don't see very much anymore is just loyalty to a program, right? You have T-Mac and Noah who have every opportunity in the world to go wherever they want, but they stuck with the program. And even Noah, after a tough season, decided to stay here again. You don't see that every day in college football. Like you don't see the Khalil Macks that go to Buffalo for however many years he was there and get drafted from Buffalo. The guys that are willing to be at a small school, excel, put their skills on display and get drafted from there and stay there without going to get the glitz and glamour. I think that's the tradition that comes with that and the history that comes with that. It's sad to see that kind of fade from college football. You do still have your spots where that exists. I think when you do run into a situation like that or do see a situation like that, then it deserves to be put on a pedestal more than maybe it has before.
How have you navigated, and more mentally, because I know recruiting isn't your primary endeavor right now, but it shifted so much where the relational piece isn't what it once was. It's just what you're going to pay me. It's professional free agency. So
No doubt.
it's how do you navigate that when everything in your space has always been relational and that's gone to the back burner, right? Where you used to be able to have an edge because you were a relationship builder, and now it's just, how many zeros?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that definitely takes a lot away from recruiting in terms of getting on a guy early, being his first offer. I think those things have decreased in value as the years have gone on. Like you said, just because the money has been at the forefront of everything. But I think the best way I've seen that you could counteract that is just with development. And especially like you see guys that have been through it, they've gone to the big schools, they've been in the SEC, they've gotten paid, and now they're on their second or third chance and they're just looking for an opportunity to get better and play. I think I've seen those situations pop up enough in college football to know that, like, and while they're not as common as the I want a big contract, I want to get paid, I think those things bring life to it and encourage you for the future. I even think about our situation in Arizona. We brought 6 mid-year guys in. 3 of them are on their last year of college football, and 2 of them are freshmen. And so we're going to have an opportunity to, number one, develop the freshmen and develop those last-year players. But
did you say 6?
Yeah, we brought 6 receivers in.
I just want to make sure. I thought I heard 60 for a second. I was waiting.
Oh, no, 6. Yes,
6 receivers. Got it.
2. T-Mac left, so we had to go get some dudes back in the room. But even the guys that are coming back, I think it's just the great opportunity to develop them and work with them, as well as like even the older guys that we signed, seeing that they're in it for the right reasons and they're working towards a goal. They have a purpose to what they do. Situations like that bring life to everything, even amidst the craziness of recruiting.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch all of this. My buddy he was the head coach at a Division II program forever. They canceled their athletic program. He's now the associate basically at a D1, and it's just straight cash, homie. It's not even, you hand them off to the GM works with the agent, and it's professional sports. So it's just wild to me. All right, so as you think about you navigating each site that you're at, right? In the college programs historically, especially at the smaller schools, you're close with the other coaches that aren't necessarily coaching your same sport. What have you picked up? You mentioned the multi-sport piece, but watching some of the other programs train that you've been able to steal.
Yeah, I'm a big basketball fan. Outside of football, I'd say that's probably my favorite sport. Go Lakers. Just had to throw that out there. But even like when it comes to that and receiver play, I think there's a lot of similarities. And you've probably seen it out there. I know AI has influenced a lot of releases. Like Devontae Adams has talked about that, a couple other guys.
The crossover move.
Oh, yeah. But just like the simplest thing is just it's about gaining leverage. Like I talk about all the time, like you're a point guard or a shooting guard, Kobe Bryant, for example, at the top of a key, and you got a defender on you that's just like a corner lining up in front of you. All right, what leverage is he giving me? All right, he's inside leverage. I know I need to work the outside half of a man. How do I get to the outside half of a man? And there's different ways to get there when it comes to your footwork. But watching how basketball players position their feet or watching what they do with their upper body to hold a defender or freeze a defender where they're at, their eyes, all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot with that translates to football. And so I remember when I was at Georgia Southern, we had a freshman named Keon Wallace, and he was a hooper. Like he was a hooper that got into football late and showed enough ability late in his high school career to get a scholarship to play football. And it just wasn't clicking for him. He's like, oh, I was a hooper growing up. And I was like, oh, imagine you're at the top of the key. This is the situation. Oh, that makes perfect sense. And just finding ways to make it make sense for the kids. It's been the biggest takeaway I've gotten from that. And I haven't necessarily, I wouldn't say I collaborated with a lot of coaches. I went to all the basketball games. I was at Whitewater. I went to a bunch of games. I was at Southern. But just with the workload and what I was doing in football, I didn't necessarily go tap in with them as much as I probably should have. But watching from afar, I'd say that was probably like one of the biggest things I took away from it.
What is an analyst versus an assistant? Talk a little bit about that separation, because you mentioned O-line analyst, you mentioned you're a wide receiver analyst, you were a running backs coach. What's the difference?
So when you're a GA, first thing is you're in school. So you're working towards your master's degree, and you have the ability to go to camps over summer. So like at this time of the year, like I would be going to SMU or TCU or Sac State or all these different camps over across the country, recruiting and working the mega camps. Last year I worked at SMU. I've worked at NAU. There's been a couple different schools that have allowed me to work at their camps. So that's a big thing that kind of goes into the different seasonal jobs that come with being a coach. And then when you're an analyst, so really the only difference is you're not in school anymore and you can't go to those camps. Obviously from there, like as a position coach, as a GA and analyst, you're supporting in a room. You gain enough trust from a coach, or you're in a situation that allows, then maybe you take the young guys and you run that room, which Coach Wade has gave me the opportunity to do, which I'm appreciative for. Or in some offenses, you coach like tight end. If you're a tight ends analyst, you could coach the fullbacks. Or if you're a receivers analyst, you coach the inside receivers. In some offenses, I haven't really been a part of that, but you'll see that from situation to situation. And then when you get to be a position coach and you're running the room, you're on the road recruiting, you're driving around the country. If you're at Georgia Southern and you're not flying everywhere, if you're recruiting nationally, then you're up on a jet across the country and back over and over again for 4 weeks in a row. And then obviously once you get to the coordinator role, then that's when you have the ability to call plays with the head coaches and you're responsible for the unit. So that's how I would summarize the different spots.
And your year at ASU, you guys are still at Pac-12.
Oh, yeah.
This year, I believe, was year one of the Pac-12 implosion. So this would be your first year, and you guys were in the Big 12.
Yes, sir.
I would love your take on that. Obviously,
Yeah,
the landscape is shifting, but just how different was that having to go back and forth across the country versus staying on the West Coast?
we played at Kansas State. We played at UCF. So we had a couple long travel games where you're not getting back to your house till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then obviously you got to turn around. It's not like the week changes. I would say the travel, you have to learn how to manage your time better and find times to rest, find times to take a nap, find days you can go to bed early, sleep in a little bit. So that was a challenge. I think it wore on our players even more just because you got to travel somewhere and then go and perform. But the biggest difference, honestly, that I've seen is just the physicality in the Big 12 as opposed to the Pac 12 and the bodies that come with that. Is now we're seeing these 6'1", 6'2" corners. Their arms are hanging down to their knees. Like they're able to grab you and hold you, and no one's going to call a flag. No one's going to throw a defensive pass interference or holding or anything. So you got to learn to work through that.
So is it real? It's like you're playing
Yeah,
a
it's real.
different
It's really
sport
real.
in the Big 12 versus the Pac 12?
Oh yeah. No, you see a difference in the style of play, I would say. And then, like I said, like the DB bodies, like USC, you're going to get those 5'9", 5'10" corners that they're running a 4-3, but they're little. And then you get the same thing in the Big 12. Now they're walking around 6'2" with their arms hanging to the ground, and they just grab you and hold you, and you got to go win regardless. I think we ran into that a little bit when we went down to Kansas State this year and adjusted off of that. But yeah.
Does that change how, and obviously you're not necessarily in the planning phase of these conversations, but does that change how your head coaches, coordinators, whomever is directing the recruit? Hey, we can't
Oh,
compete
yeah.
in the Big 12 with the guys we used to have in the Pac 12.
No doubt. I think you see a little bit of uptick in the value of size when it comes to recruiting. Like we're trying to go get those big dudes too now, instead of just getting little people that run around everyone. And then shoot, even like when it comes to the planning and the game plan, it's like, all right, now we need to work press releases when dudes got their hands on us. Now we need to work second level releases. So I think the day-to-day changes as well as the big picture view of everything, just with the change of conference and the change of competition.
Besides resources,
Yeah.
what is the biggest difference, not better or worse, of being in, and let's say coaching, that's what took you there, but being in the
Yeah.
South versus being in the Southwest per se, versus being in the Northern Lakes area? Like what's noticeable? This is just different. And not, it's not good or bad, but it's, if you
Yeah.
understand, if you're moving to this area, it's just different.
I would say the biggest thing is just so like Statesboro is my experience in the South, so I just based off of that. There is nothing to do in Statesboro. We had a couple restaurants. For me, growing up in Arizona, we had one good Mexican restaurant. There
In
wasn't
Statesboro, not in Arizona.
in Statesboro. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah, didn't have a mall. Shoot, we didn't have a Target in Statesboro. Yeah, and then you go take
But
my
it could
experience.
support a university, but they don't have the box store.
No doubt. Like I tell people all the time, when I lived in Whitewater, Wisconsin, I could get on a bike and bike from one end of the town to the other end of the town in 15 minutes. No exaggeration. And then you're on ASU in Arizona. Like I'm in the great state of Arizona where you have everything to do. And so it's just being able, the distractions, I think, is a real thing. I think people talk about that all the time with an outside perspective looking in, but they don't really understand. I'm in a big city. On my way home, I'm passing 10 restaurants, I'm passing stores, there's people all around. There's plenty to do when you're in rural deep south. There ain't nothing here. Let's go get some work in. There's nothing else to think about. There's nothing else on your mind. I think just being disciplined in how you manage your time and how you spend it is a big emphasis for me ever since I got back from Georgia. But shoot, the pace of life is different. Even like everything in the South is slower, whereas in Arizona or the West Coast, my family lives in California. Everything is just rapidly moving, never stopping. Yeah, no, it's very different experiences.
I know you're still early in the journey, but what
Yeah,
would you say you have changed your mind on? And I want specifics, right? In this
yeah,
world of polarization where everybody's in
yeah,
an echo chamber, I'm always curious about the way in which people are challenging their beliefs, right? And you're a
yep,
coach's kid, you've been at a high level, you've been at a small level.
Yep.
It's got to be some things where it's like, you know what, I don't believe this anymore, and here's why. And it can be about coaching, it can be about life, it can be about reading
Yeah.
books. I don't really care, but I'm just curious, like where you've put some things down and adopted others that you never really thought that you'd be on that side of things.
Yeah. I would say there's two things that kind of stick out when you ask that question. The first thing is just communication, right? And then with coaching and communication, the first thing you think about is someone yelling at you to get a point across. And that's how I was raised. My dad used to yell at me all the time, rip my ass. It's like, oh, what are you doing? And kind of working for Coach Edwards, Coach Lewis, and all those guys, you learn that's not the most effective way to communicate information. It's like I'm sitting there yelling, spitting in your face. It's like, what are you going to digest from that? I just got yelled at. I must have done something wrong. I don't know what I did wrong, though. Whereas if I bring you to the side, put my arm around you and have a real conversation and break it down step by step, I think that is what I've seen and I've had success with is that's the best way to communicate. So I think I learned that early on in my coaching career that I've carried that with me. And then the second thing is, and probably the biggest of all, is just the power of positivity and what that does for your mindset as a coach that is burnt out and exhausted and maybe doesn't want to get up and do a meeting or doesn't want to spend some extra time with a dude when you finally have the chance to go home. I think it, number one, makes you more grateful for where you're at and kind of what you're going through. But number two, like the effect that has on other people is monumental. And you never know what your players are going through. You never know what your assistants are going through or people you work with are. I think that's kind of, I learned it in college actually from one of my teammates. His name was Stanford Ellis. Every time he broke the team down, he said positivity on three. And I didn't really understand that then. But I think with having the opportunity to work with the guys I worked with and be around the people I've been around, that kind of has actually made sense to me now and resonates with me. And it's something that I'm not going to sit here and say I'm great at, but I try to push that agenda as much as I possibly can.
No, it's great that you're learning that early instead of later. Some of us do. It's you can start your career in a much more positive, focused
Yeah,
way.
absolutely.
Awesome. Coach, I appreciate you taking the time and jumping on here and giving me some wisdom. I'm looking forward
Absolutely.
to hopefully maybe you come to the area at some point we can connect because I definitely don't come to the heat of Arizona unless I'm dragged there.
Not this time of the year, but should
Yeah.
you give us the 8 other months of the year, then you'd be looking to come out here and spend some time.
Maybe, but
Maybe.
for the undoctrinated, I live in the most beautiful place in the world and I try never to leave. So,
There you
uh,
go.
but appreciate you taking the time, man. Looking forward to meeting you in person when the time permits.
Yes, sir. No, it was great to meet you. Thankful to Wesley for connecting us and I look forward to it.